make sure you figure out the way to celebrate your wins. You expect them, but you need to celebrate them. You need to appreciate it. And I think we move on too quickly. It's always what's next. So just figure out a little bit of a celebration that can make it last a little bit longer.
Hey, this is Jesse here, and you're about to hear my discussion with Reid Rooney from Betsperts Media and Technology Group, which is home to leading brands in the fantasy, dynasty, and sports betting ecosystem. In this wide-ranging discussion, Reid pulls back the curtain on why Betsperts is using a roll-up strategy to create a multi-brand ecosystem with partners such as Matthew Berry and Paige Spiranac, what he looks for in acquisition targets, how he thinks about building and maintaining culture across the properties in the Betsperts portfolio, his experience raising 8 figures worth of capital to grow the Betsperts business, and his personal journey confronting and overcoming mental health challenges as a founder. Reid's an impressive entrepreneur that shared a ton of insights and alpha in this episode, and I know you're going to enjoy this one as much as I did. The Betting Startups podcast is presented by Optimove, the creator of positionless marketing and the #1 player engagement platform. Positionless marketing gives every marketer the power to execute any marketing task instantly and independently, and Optimove Ignite Plus is its program to support early-stage iGaming startups. If you're attending SBC Summit in Lisbon this September, you can find Optimove at stand A555 and tell them that Betting Startups sent you to receive your first month free. All right, we are back here on the Betting Startups podcast, and for this episode, I'm joined by somebody who, by his own admission, has been building a little bit under the radar over the last number of years within the sports betting industry, but I managed to convince him to join me in the hot seat for a conversation today on the back of some news that has come out about his company. Reid Rooney is here from the Betsperts Group. Reid, how is it going in Chicago today?
Well, it's going well. And as soon as I heard your Canadian accent, it was a pretty easy yes for me. My Canadian wife would be disappointed if I wasn't hospitable to you. So I appreciate you having me on here. And Chicago in summertime is close to, if not one of the best cities in the world. So it's going really well here. As long as Caleb Williams is good this fall, it'll go great.
Awesome, man. Well, look, let's just start here at the beginning and learn a little bit about yourself before we get into everything Betsperts. For the audience that may not be familiar with you, can you give us just a quick synopsis of who you are, your background and journey before you started Betsperts?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm from the Chicagoland area, one of the suburbs. Went to high school around here, and played baseball at Central Michigan University, Coach Chip was. I actually studied entrepreneurship there, went back and got a graduate degree or master's in entrepreneurship as well. And then after school, started at a small 10-person company, had some great experience there, then went to a Fortune 200 company, had some great experiences there too, and met my co-founder who actually performed the wedding ceremony for my wife and I, and Betsperts Group was formed. But well before that, I'm a diehard White Sox fan, as I mentioned earlier, Canadian wife. She played soccer at CMU, and we live right downtown Chicago, as we were just talking about, with our cat, no kids. And love to travel, but eat and drink our way around the city of Chicago, kind of our go-tos.
Take us back to the origins of Betsperts. You know, get back in the DeLorean, go back to whatever it was, 2017, 2018. Where were you at that time? And how did you and your co-founder arrive at this conversation to even start a company? And then how did you drill down on the fact that you wanted to start something in and around sports, and particularly betting, when even at that time, you know, it wasn't clear that betting would become regulated and legal in the US. Just take us back to the origins of it and those early conversations that kind of got the whole story started here.
Yeah. So funny enough, my brother, he's a partner at fifth biggest accounting firm in the world, and he's on the M&A side. And I've pitched him 1,000 ideas starting a company, because that's what he looks at every day. And I got 1,999 no's, and eventually pitched him Betsperts, and then started to work with Austin, my co-founder, on some of the concepts behind it. But the reason being, well, we were looking at what we wanted to start. We wanted to start young enough before we had any extended families or anything like that. We looked at crypto, cannabis, and sports betting. Those were the 3 areas where I think the generation for myself and him were kind of the 3 growing industries, I would say. I didn't know a whole lot about crypto or cannabis at the time. To be fair, I could have just put it all in Bitcoin and it probably would have worked out well. But as we looked at the industries, I knew more about sports and sports betting. I knew that it was more social than I think anyone was giving it credit for at the time. And in my mind, and kind of what was hot in the world of social media at the time, was crowdsourcing. And so we kind of got around the idea of building an app to crowdsource expertise and think about an action network and pick tracking aspect of that. we built something that was much more specific and permanent, where there was no changing lines or editing. But if you picked correct or incorrectly during a game, you got down to, like, I'm a White Sox fan, you'd get down to the AL Central, White Sox, and what type of bet it was. And then you could search who was the best White Sox under better through the first 5 innings and follow their picks, and kind of crowdsourcing expertise, because sports gambling is hard enough. But if you pay close enough attention to your favorite teams or specific teams or conferences, you might have an edge. So we got around that idea and talked to quite a few people about it. And there was enough momentum to form Betsperts Group and start a business.
So at that time, Reid, right, you really had this opportunity identified where you would build essentially a media platform and a media property predicated on content, pick tracking, all these sort of ancillary things. And you guys came to market with a consumer product under the Betsperts brand and operated for some period of time, which does deviate from where you're at now. And we'll come back to that. But again, just sticking with the origins of it, talk about kind of going to market and your experience actually going live and kind of what you learned through those first iterations of the Betsperts business.
Yeah, from a building of a business perspective, one, we had a contracting group out in India help build the first app. And the first time we sent a wire, we thought we were getting scammed potentially, just because we were terrified to do so and had never done this before. But we were able to find a good group that helped us start to scale and build what we were looking to do. But the real interesting part, as I look back on some of the mistakes and how naive we might have been, was around the business of sports betting and media and sports betting. I remember the first conference I ever went to was a small one in Chicago. We met Chris Grove there, and he asked him about the idea. He asked about affiliate licenses. And I was like, what do you mean affiliate licenses? And just crazy to think back of coming from an outside industry, how little we actually knew. What we knew and what we could do was build a pretty solid product that could build a community. And as we built the community, figure out the business aspect from there. And that has actually led us a lot to where we are now. And I think you just look back and you learn something new every day, whether it was building a product, whether it was building a team, whether it was fundraising, or specific to the industry, how we were actually going to make money and revenue and what that looked like, and some of the legal aspects we could have never even imagined before actually doing it. So going back and thinking about how new we were, I'm grateful that the industry was so new that it wasn't that rare, to be honest.
So you came to market with this original idea for Betsperts as a consumer brand, a consumer platform, and at some point sort of shifted the focus to this multi-brand ecosystem. What was the catalyst for that originally? Was that by design, or have you sort of accidentally found yourself going down this path, or was it really by design from the very beginning?
I'd say kind of a combination, honestly. From where Austin and I came from, we worked at Stanley Black Decker, and for those who don't know, that is one of the largest, if not largest, tool companies in the world, and like physical tools, right? And so I managed about a couple $100 million sales relationships with our largest customers. Austin did the product, finance, and manufacturing responsibilities there. And so when we thought about the attitude that we had seen be successful when we were there, they had acquired a few more. So every time you walked to the job site, or every time you worked to talk to someone in construction or a facility, you had a tool and a brand with a niche for every need that they would have. So it was a one-stop shop. And so with that in the back of our minds from our previous experience, when we were presented with the opportunity for the first and second potential acquisitions, I think it clicked really quickly with us. And we realized at the time, as we were getting some success and some scale, revenue via a social app or an affiliate via an app is a difficult journey. So what we looked at was, how do we get scale and how do we get sustainable recurring revenue for X period of time, so we're never putting the whole business at risk because of a state launch or a delay or something along those lines. And that's kind of how it came to be. But we were fortunate enough to meet some really, really helpful strategic people in the business that gave us those opportunities or made those introductions. They then Eggman introduced us to our first acquisition. And through our first acquisition, we met our second acquisition, and so on and so forth. But I think there was a little bit of intent after we kind of figured out that was the way to go from our previous experience, and it's worked out really well so far.
Got it. All right. Well, let's fast forward now to the present, Reid. And again, for the benefit of the audience, can you just quickly map out the ecosystem of brands under the Betsperts Group umbrella and give us a sense of sort of what you guys have in market as of today?
Yeah, absolutely. So few different brands. And funny enough, Betsperts Group, the Betspert Act doesn't exist anymore. But under the Betsperts Group, we have 4 for 4, which is a fantasy football subscription business for drafting advice and tools for betting as well, rankings and anything you need to win your typical fantasy league. That was an acquisition. It's an incredible brand with huge retention numbers, and we're very proud to have. For the springtime, we have Dynasty League football. Dynasty League is, and I say this affectionately, for the more nerdy or serious long-term fantasy players. I've been a baseball one for 20 years. But the training camp draft, rookies, free agents, that's the time where Dynasty is so important. So we have off-season football attention and subscribers there. We have Betsperts Golf, which we started with Paige Spiranac back in the day. And that is a platform that helps you model your own individual golf betting DFS model. It's very, very highly customizable. We built that and has continued to scale and led us to our most recent acquisition, which I'll get to in a second. We have BleacherNation.com, which is a large media brand that's, as they say, fans writing for fans in regards to whether it's Chicago sports, that's where it started, and has scaled to a lot of national sports as well. But it is a really, really strong human-written website or written content across Chicago sports, national sports, any top stories, gambling, and so on and so forth. It's just been a great property to own and have, and the loyalty around it is incredible. That started as a Chicago Cubs vlog, so the better they do, the better for us, which is ironic because I'm a White Sox fan and can't stand the Cubs. But hey, we're cheering for them for traffic purposes this year. And then we have Bleacher Nation Fantasy, which is used to be Fantasy Life app, Matthew Berry's social media app for fantasy players with the fastest breaking news alerts. That's where we're putting our DFS pick'em game in. And it's got a couple 100,000. We just actually this week surpassed 500,000 total users over a lifespan of it. And we should expect about 250,000 users this fall, which is great. And then most recently, we acquired Fantasy National, which is the original golf modeling subscription business. It sold 7 years ago. If you recognize the name Pat Mayo, he is one of the 2 founding members of that, and he's coming over to Betsperts Group with us. But Fantasy National plus Betsperts Golf and kind of the build out that we're going to have, we believe 2027 will have the one-stop shop for golf bettors and fantasy players moving forward. So all in all, trying to make sure that we have strong SEO, top of the funnel. We have very high retention subscription businesses. We have an app where you're going to get the fastest breaking news alerts. So we're relevant every day. But at some point, you're touching our brands, our communities, connecting with our other subscribers or app users throughout the day, and make sure that we're relevant to you at any point throughout the year.
I mean, look, I talk to founders more at the earlier stage of their journeys on this podcast. And I mean, really, you're the first one who is actively pursuing, as I say, a bit of a roll-up strategy here. So I want to kind of spend a few minutes here, Reid, if you're up for it, just kind of diving in and unpacking really what that looks like on a practical basis. And for you as the founder of the Betsperts Group, kind of how you operate with this type of strategy underpinning everything. And I guess really like, what do you look for as maybe must-haves versus nice-to-haves in potential targets that make sure new brands or new assets would fit within the current ecosystem that you've already built? Like really, I guess, yeah, ultimately, like what are your guiding principles as you sort of survey opportunities as they come to you?
I think it's a good question. Transparently, I think it's probably a little bit too broad of a question. And I'll explain why, because I think each acquisition was at a different stage of the company. So the guiding principles have changed throughout time. I will tell you, there's been one that's been consistent, so that I'll reference here shortly. But as we continue to scale the business and try and find more opportunities, it has to become more profitable, or it has to become more incremental for us versus a couple of years ago when we had no experience doing this. We were trying to find the best companies that would find us as a good suitor, right? So it was a little bit more of a dance back then. But right now, I would tell you the number one thing, and I think hopefully a lot of folks in our industry are continuing to go towards this, because I think it's a colossal mistake if not. The properties, the community, or properties or businesses or brands that you have, if you don't have a community as the new goose, I think it's going to be a tough sledding for a long period moving forward. When ChatGPT, TikTok, and Google search all become more and more difficult for ranking or getting people to visit you, I think they have to have a reason that you're part of their behavior. Whether that's they follow someone like a John Paulson from 4 for 4 or a Pat Mayo from the Betsperts golf team now, they might follow them for where their content is or where their word says this is the place to get rankings or modeling. I think that's the kind of the influencer world. But if you have a Discord or like Bleacher Nation has a comment section that people go back and they get that sense of community back and forth, I think that is a big, big piece of it. So retention, community, nucleus is a huge piece of what we look at and kind of require. So from your original question, that is always been a case and will continue to be a case because I just think the world is going to get lonelier and lonelier currently. And if you can provide a home and a place people feel comfortable, they will reward you with loyalty. And I think we've seen that to be true. But as we move forward, I think we're in a bit of a unique opportunity. You've seen gambling.com group, you've seen Better Collective. Before they were Better Collective, you saw Playmaker Capital. All these businesses that are much more capitalized than us make large acquisitions that have rolled up into a pretty impressive set of brands and placed in the market. I don't think many groups are going after sub $10 million revenue businesses at the moment, especially sub $5 million. It's just not worth their time as they continue to scale and kind of swing for the fences. So I think it's a really interesting space in gambling and fantasy right now from a $1 million to a $10 million business. I think some folks are tired. Some folks would like to diversify revenue opportunities as subscriptions may get harder, or there are more tools that are free, or influencers are leaving and starting their own brand. So while we look at those businesses, I think we get a lot across our desk, or at least I do, because we've made 4 or 5 acquisitions at this point. So people see us as a likely target for acquiring them. And for me, moving forward in the last 18 months, the world has changed where it's about profitability, it's about EBITDA, it's continuing to scale. So the financial situation has to be different than it was 2, 3, 4 years ago when we were looking for scale or an entry into a market. So for me right now, if you have a community, your incremental traffic, and we're not competing against each other, incremental traffic or tools or technology, but you have a profitable business at the moment, I'm always interested and we're actively looking. But those would be kind of where we're at today. I just think sometimes you get something that comes across your desk that you're not expecting that can take your business into a different category. And our first one with Fantasy Life app, that did it. We got 200,000 app users overnight and better technology and more scale, and Matthew Berry along with it on our board. So those made the company go to the next level. At this point, it is much more of a financial decision.
And as you say, right, you've had 4 or 5 acquisitions now over the last few years. And I would assume with each one, right, you're developing the muscle, you're developing new learning, new capabilities and experience, really at the end of the day, kind of going through this process. So with the benefit of having done it a few times now in a sample size of 4 or 5, on the integration side, talk a little bit about how you're essentially integrating, or maybe not integrating the new properties you acquire into sort of the mothership, if you will. Do you have this concept of like shared services across the different properties? Does each one operate completely autonomously and standalone with its own P&L and management team? Like, give us a bit of color, I guess, just on the integration playbook to the extent you might have one.
That's a really, really good question. I think it changes with each acquisition. I think we have gotten to the point where we have our process now, so it probably fits more into our process than we fit into what could or should happen. The first one we did, maybe the first 2 we did, we took a little bit longer to make adjustments and to learn how acquisitions go and integration. It just took more standardization time, which I don't think people necessarily account for the cost of that time. And so 3, 4, and 5, we got a lot better at it. What I'll tell you is I'm very firm in the belief and not making too many changes right away, especially if there's a loyal customer base. The customers have to tell you, can you professionalize some of the systems and data collection or distributions or design or tech? Absolutely. But you have to stay with a lot of the thesis of what the community or group wants and listen to the actual feedback rather than better. And if you can do that while professionalizing the back end, it works out to be pretty well. So the last acquisition we did, when we were presenting it to our board and potential investors and other folks, we would talk about how much we could cut out day one of cost or what was redundant and what year 2 and 3 and 4 looks like. And I think that story becomes very believable after you've done it a couple of times. I'll tell you, the first time, second time, more expensive and longer than we expected or would have liked. We've gotten a lot better at it each time. And I feel like we're pretty confident in our process, but each time we'll kind of reflect on what we could have done better and make sure we implement that for the next time.
Just talking about culture, I know it's a very broad, ambiguous term, but every time you make an acquisition, obviously each of these properties and companies really has their own DNA, their own culture. How do you, as the CEO, unify culture within the Betsperts Group and these, I guess, constellation of properties?
Again, I'm not saying this just to say this. I think it's a great question. I think one of the hardest things, especially being completely remote, was how do we build the culture internally? A couple of the businesses that we bought, I would say, were lifestyle businesses before, and in the most complimentary way possible. Incredible businesses. The potential founding team had gotten a little tired. It was time for a different part of life. And so as you bring that on, how do you, one, provide opportunities for that team to grow within the business? How do you look at that team that's coming over? But two, how do you change the attitude comfortably and in an exciting way to say, hey, this is a venture-backed business. This is a little bit different end goal and speed and decision-making process. Getting people up to speed on that can't be faked, or else it's not a great place to work. And I'm very proud of kind of the retention we've had of a lot of the employees that have come over in positions. We were a 3-person company when we in our first acquisition. And majority of the people that still are at our business came from acquisitions. The senior level management, I would say each person at that came from acquisition. They might have been the number 2 at the business beforehand, and the CEO or founder was tired and gave us 6, 9, 12 months, whatever it is. And then somebody else takes over. But you got to identify that. You have to let their culture tell you, hey, this is how we've done it previously. And then explain and believe and show exactly the culture that you want. It takes some time. Each time we get better at it and better at it, but it's very, very clear set of expectations and deliveries. And it's a different challenge every single time, but it's one that we have gotten better at because of the people teaching us about their philosophies, their culture as well, because it can't be faked and you got to be authentic.
And I want to talk just briefly about sort of how you approach the structure of these deals and putting them together. And again, like not a huge sample size and every deal is unique inherently, but is there any sort of standard terms or mechanisms you look for in putting a deal together? Are they all cash deals? Is there an equity component? Is there a seller finance? Like, give us a bit of insight into how you approach the structuring of these deals on a case-by-case basis.
The first conversation about structure is typically pretty standard, where we have done all equity. We've done cash plus equity. We've done cash earnout with a little bit of equity. We've done a bunch of earnout, and there's different structures in plug and play and how, depending on the beliefs the founding team has or the ownership team has of what the business could be or what they want, or they don't want to take risk. It really, really varies. But being straightforward about, hey, here's what we think. Then you get to a number. They're higher, you're lower, and you figure it out. And you might be able to offer, okay, here's what we can do in all cash. Here's what we can do in all cash over 3 years, guaranteed still. Or here's what we can do with earnouts and beliefs and equity and so on and so forth. But I think I approach it probably a little different than either private equity or large groups. It's a very honest, transparent conversation. And here's what we value it at. I know it's your baby, and this is not a defense. This is just why and how, and here are the numbers. But if that's interesting, let's talk. If not, congratulations. We like your business enough that we're interested in it, but it's just the value to us. And what are you trying to get out of it? And I think, honestly, one of the things that's helped us close some of these is, again, there aren't too many acquiring options in our industry, in the media space, for that size that we've done currently. As we continue to scale up, there's a little bit more of a competition. I prefer to figure out a way where, hey, there's a little bit of equity at least in every deal, so we're incentivized in the right way together. And that way we can pay whatever we have to pay over a period of time with some of the profitability and professionalism that we bring into the operations, hopefully. And that way the deal becomes a little less to us, and they might even make more because the value to the organization. So that's in general how we look at it, but it's just honest, transparent conversations, and doesn't always work all that well.
And for you here in whatever second half of 2025, and just given kind of where we're at, 7 years removed from PASPA being overturned, and we're arguably in a more mature phase now of the sports betting market, looking at your portfolio of properties and assets within the Betsperts Group, you obviously have a different composition of revenue through affiliate, through probably more paid media. You're a multi-revenue business. I guess as you look at that revenue composition though, Reid, Is there one sort of revenue channel that to you is more intriguing here in 2025 than others? We hear a lot and talk a lot about the affiliate landscape in particular, shifting pretty rapidly under our feet. Yeah, I guess how do you sort of size up the revenue channels and where really the more valuable revenue is for you, in your opinion?
I think one of the interesting conversations I typically have is, depending if I'm talking to someone from the States or talking to someone from Europe, those are typically the groups I work most closely with. The European groups don't necessarily always comprehend why or how Americans pay so much for subscriptions. It just is not part of their daily behavior necessarily. It's becoming more, but I think that was always a surprise. Americans, I think the subscription side is very intriguing because it's just part of our daily behavior, whether it's for Netflix or for 4for4, right? And so I would love to get to a point where our subscription business covers our cost. And it just is a break-even business based on our subscriptions. And I'd love it to be more, but they're trying to be realistic. What we look to do then is our ad deals, whether it's programmatic or direct ad deals because of our traffic, our affiliate, our fantasy DFS game that we're operating. All of that is upside and the profitability that we can put back into the business to grow our subscription business or to go non-dilutively acquire more brands and businesses. The reason I like that is because you can pretty much depend on subscription. You never know on ad rates. You never know on if the cookies are changed, right? You never know on affiliate what the laws are going to be in each state or if they get pushed back or more of a duopoly or three-headed horse right now or three operator race at the moment. I think if you look at it when it's more affiliates, a little easier to do. When I look at the long-term vision though, I still think being short-sighted would be detrimental. The long-term vision is iGaming rev share, and I think it's going to take a few years. I think we're well aware of that. But if you can set yourself up for the rest of your core business with the diversified revenue to still be profitable, still let you non-dilutively acquire, the pot of gold would be in the iGaming market. And so that's kind of what we look towards long-term. Short-term, we'd like to get the subscription business as profitable as possible to try and cover the rest of the business. And then everything else is the upside that we can go use to acquire more customers or acquire more businesses.
Let's talk about the capital side of all of this. Obviously, being in an acquisition mode, you got to have some resources behind you. I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, Betsperts raised something to the tune of $6 million as a Series A back in 2021-ish. Mm-hmm. And in the most recent acquisition, there was a comment in the release that went out that you're now looking to raise some new capital. So for the audience, if you can just give a backgrounder on what you guys have raised to date and then talk about kind of the current fundraising efforts and sort of how you plan to grow and scale into the next phase of Betsperts.
I'd say maybe the most traditional part of our experience as founders at this moment, we've done a family and friends. We did a seed, we did a Series A, we did an A2, and we have a convertible note out right now that I think we've filled a decent portion of, which we're pretty happy about. So still a little room out there if anyone would like to talk for them. But from our side, I think we've raised, I'll tell you, north of 8 figures. And we've been very fortunate to be supported by closest people in our lives, as well as just great venture groups around it. If you think about the American venture groups, Parlay Capital, HBSC Ventures, Varence Capital here in the States, and then overseas, we have Velo Partners and Super Group, Growthbox, Oakvale, and just a really, really great group of advisors and people around us. And so each time we've raised, I think it's been a new experience for us. It was first time with family and friends. Then for seed and Series A, it was back in the gold rush of sports betting in the States and money was easy to come by. Then the last two have been a little bit more challenging and you got to get the business metrics right, not just scale and promise. And so I think I've probably learned more from the fundraising portion and creating a actual team and integrating a bunch of businesses together. I think those have been where I've learned the most. But the fundraising has changed so significantly in 7 years. And then you get to a point where you're either going to raise a little bit to scale and you got to show the profitability and the ROI behind it, or someone comes to you and says, you're doing this roll-up. Do you want $10 to $20 million? Who would you go acquire? Or what would the exit be there? So trying to realize the right partnerships and the right groups is almost, if not more important than the actual capital in the door. So we've been very, very lucky. And I think that I'd say low 6 figure or low 7 figures that we're bringing in on this convertible note is something that we're really happy about with some of the people that are coming aboard.
Yeah, I mean, you really just rattled off like a Mount Rushmore of capital partners within the space on your cap table. So, I mean, that says a lot of...
There's a few we would like to add that have said no a couple of times, but yes, we're very, very lucky on the group.
Yeah, incredible, Reid. Look, you talked earlier on about how some of the founders of the properties, whether or not you've acquired them or not, some of these conversations reveal the fact that some of these founders have been on long journeys, and maybe for them it hasn't been as up and to the right as they would like, and they're maybe a bit tired, and maybe that's part of their rationale for looking to exit and kind of find something new to put their energy into. I'm curious for you, whatever it might be, 7-8 years into the journey here with Betsperts, I get from you that you still have a lot of energy and passion and enthusiasm for what it is you're building, but like, how do you maintain that level of energy and enthusiasm? It's a long slog, it's a grind. What are some of the things you do for yourself to kind of get out of bed every morning with that same level of conviction and optimism and excitement that you probably did 7 years ago when you first started out?
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm a very honest guy, I think, and direct. So I'll kind of let you in behind closed doors here. I think the promise of entrepreneurship early on was exciting. Austin and I were still in a full-time job, working nights with our Indian contracting group. And it was just, you could just do it because you sensed something new every day, right? And then it gets to the point of is the business going to be alive tomorrow a couple of times? And you get through that and it worked out and the energy was there and you get to sustainability. And what I learned early on in the process, and I've tried to get better at, is you really don't celebrate the wins of entrepreneurship very much. You just go, what's next? And you go back down to the problems and you figure out how to fix a problem. You have a nice win, great, but what's the next problem? And so I always tell people entrepreneurship's harder than I could ever describe. I think it's lonelier than I could ever describe. And when the market maybe 2 years ago in sports betting kind of leveled out, we flattened out, we got to profitability, we did what we were supposed to do, but it was the first time we kind of really had a bump in the road, and thankfully we had great people to support us. But we had a couple people, we had to trim the team just a little bit, and a couple people who were great and really good at their job, but their job just wasn't the direction moving forward. So we had to cut people for the first time, which is the only time, by the way, which is something that I take very, very seriously. And it actually put me into a bit of a depression, honestly. And I started going to therapy for it. I started reaching out to other founders. And I think there's nothing more therapeutic than complaining or pitching to another founder with the exact same problem because you understand it. And I am very, very, very pro therapy. If anyone is ever on the edge, I think you should go and find the right group and you will be very happy with that decision. But now when we got the business right-sided and profitable and sustainable, now we have the opportunity to scale in the positive way. You can scale, just put numbers on a slide and kind of fake a scale for a bit. But now we have the ability to scale profitability and revenue, and every dollar goes into growth versus build, or we're paying because we're not profitable or we're burning or anything. And so for me, right now is close to the most excited I've been in years. This acquisition we just did, what we're launching with our Sharp Stack betting, what we're launching with Bleacher Nation Fantasy. I feel like what we've worked so hard for and cared about so much is really starting to pay off. And I think mental health, physical health for me is in a much better place than it was a year ago and 2 years ago. I actually feel like myself again. And I appreciate you noticing that because I hope I've been giving that off. But if you had interviewed me a year and a half ago, I might have come off this way, but I would have been faking in concern and disappointment that we weren't on that hockey stick still. And I think we're back on it. So I do have more and more energy towards it. But I think the founders that I talk to are tired. If they've been in it for a while, you've seen less startups, you've seen some go under. I just think that it's a lonely place. So if you're out there and you have that one, find your group, find a therapist, find other founders, reach out to me. I think it's a place that can get real dark at times. And I've been there and working to not go back.
Well, thank you for opening up and sharing that, Reid. I know for every other founder listening to this, like some level of that resonates, right? We all go through our journeys and it is very lonely at times. And for you to shine a light on that, I think is massively valuable. So I do appreciate you calling that out. And look, mental health affects all of us and founders uniquely so. It's a very solitary existence at times, despite the fact you're constantly talking to people and doing things and keeping busy with stuff. It is just sort of you and your isolated thoughts at the end of the day, and it can be tough. So thank you for sharing all of that.
To add one last piece to that, make sure you figure out the way to celebrate your wins. You expect them, but you need to celebrate them. You need to appreciate it. And I think we move on too quickly. It's always what's next. So just figure out a little bit of a celebration that can make it last a little bit longer.
Yeah, and to your point, right? I mean, we're so busy in the weeds, in the trenches, whatever metaphor you want to use there, but it's important somehow to find a way to come out and get up to altitude, be able to kind of look down and kind of see where you're at and get that perspective. Because you're right. I mean, day to day, we all have wins, but we don't necessarily acknowledge them. And that's actually the fuel to keep going, is celebrating those wins. So good call out, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah. And I've learned more in this job than I have in an entire career before, an entire education before. And you look at like just the exit it's not just about the exit. It's not a success with just the exit or whenever you get there, the amount of people that you help employ or the partners that you have and the other people that you help. Like there's so much more to it. And it still taking me a long time to recognize that and appreciate that. So yeah, the journey is part of it. Though days feel like that's a bad thing, I just really, really want to emphasize that there's more than just the exit. The exit would be nice though.
Let's not forget the exit, of course. All right, well, let's talk about the future then. Look, you've done a lot over the last few years. What's this ultimately like the scale of the ambition here, right? And maybe let's frame it this way, Reid, which is like 5 years into the future, you got your crystal ball in front of you. What does life look like in 5 years as it relates to Betsperts? Where are you guys at that time? And yeah, what's your sort of ambition on a 5-year scale?
Yeah, I think from my side, again, pretty transparent. We are venture backed. We took our first venture investments 5.5 years ago or so. So you think about 5 years, 10 years since first investment, right? That timeline matches up pretty well. I think iGaming will be a lot closer, if not completely here, not completely, but much further along in the States. And I think that's where audience and will be the most valuable. So you look at it, I have for a long time, built in my head a plan for how we should build a business based on what I expect in 3 to 5 years. I've been wrong a bunch. So for me, when I look at it is what does the next 12 months look like transparently? In the next 12 months, I think we're going to 2.5, 3, maybe 4x revenue if we can add in 1 or 2 more acquisitions. So a lot of it organic, some of it inorganic. Definitely those numbers for profitability though. And so as we look at that, how do we plan the next year to scale like that? But while we're scaling, keep in mind that 3 to 5 years from now is probably a good time in the market, probably what investors are looking for, and making sure that our team is healthy and we're able to provide them the opportunity to continue to grow within the business. If we can't do that, then it's a troubling part where we're limiting their careers as well. So to me, it's what does the next 12 to 18 months look like, maybe 2 football seasons. And if we execute that, 3 to 5 years is going to tell us what will decide itself transparently.
Look, you have a venture-backed business, as you just stated, which means you have no free time, no discretionary time. But let's just pretend you did. What do you do to kind of just get away from it all for a minute or two, kind of get that perspective? What are some things that keep you busy or interested outside of work, which is, I'm sure, all-consuming?
Yeah, so I used to run and play basketball a lot. I had a back injury that took away that, and that probably correlated a lot with the mental health decline a few years ago as well. But I'm a big golfer. I love sports. I'm a huge White Sox, Tottenham, Notre Dame fan, Bears fan. So none of my teams ever win anything, which also probably doesn't help. But I just recently got into bowling, which sounds kind of lame, cool. But it is actually a ton of fun if you find the right group and team to go bowl. But around Chicago, live music or something along those lines. My wife, myself, Austin, his wife, just went to Red Rocks to see Mumford & Sons, which was unbelievable. So like more of travel, more of experiences, getting out and getting connected with people, I think is a big deal. But Chicago is one of the best food cities in the world. And I probably have about 15 extra pounds that can prove that I need to get back into running and basketball at some point for. But yeah, I think everything's been really, really good and healthy. And I just want to experience more rather than buy things or something along those lines. So it's what experiences are available in the community that make you feel connected.
Awesome. Before we get out of here, I'm going to hit you with a few rapid fire questions. So quick answers here, Reid. First one, when you get out of bed in the morning, check your phone. What's the first app you open?
Slack. Unfortunately, we have a group in India and for our tech, so instantaneously, which is probably not particularly healthy.
All right. If you're at the karaoke lounge, what song are you singing?
I would probably choose to listen as much as possible, but if I had to, maybe a little Shania Twain in there, some Canadian roots in it.
Okay.
No, Shania, Mumford, someone like that. I know those are two very different, but that's probably where I would go.
All right. And last one, if you could be anybody else for one day and one day only, dead or alive, who would that be?
I would have been Sonny during the Europa League final for Tottenham when he finally got to raise the trophy. That's who I would be. beloved by the world, bringing a trophy home to North London, unlike some of our rivals in North London. So that would be great.
Right on, Reid. For people listening or watching that want to get in touch with you, maybe learn more about Betsperts Group or anything else they've heard that's piqued their interest, quickly plug the best way for them to reach you.
Reid, R-E-I-D, at betspertsgroup.com. I would love to connect in here. LinkedIn as well. Again, Reid Rooney, R-E-I-D. But just you might know that I don't do LinkedIn messaging all that promptly. Email, I'm much better at. But please do reach out, and wanted to say thank you for inviting me on this one. And I think it's still a great space to be in, even though the last couple of years have been hard. And I think we're going to see a corner turned here shortly with a look ahead because of all the prediction, all the sweeps, all the iGaming. I'm excited for what's to come in the business.
Well, look, Reid, I know you don't do these pods very often, so I do really appreciate you jumping on with me and sharing a lot of your story, which I think a lot of the audience is probably hearing for the first time. Very intriguing what you're building with Betsperts and the way you're going about it, and wishing you and your teams all the best for the year and years ahead.
Thank you very much.
The Betting Startups podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 4 out of the top 5 US operators personalize player experiences with Optimove. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/bettingstartups. And if you like what you see, you'll get your first month free.